There's a young woman sitting across the desk from me. My work is to map her life onto my 8.5 by 11 inches intake sheet. She doesn't yet know that her experience is a haphazard accumulation of evidence, the building blocks to a case which will be decided by a robed figure who will dispense justice and then forget her face before the ink dries. We'll prepare the strongest case possible, I say. I ask the usual asylum application questions: where she's from, when she came to the United States, and why she's afraid of returning to her home country. She's from a Muslim country, her family's religious, and she's a lesbian. I'm silently whittling her story to a case I know will help us win. I'll paint a picture of yet another oppressed Muslim woman whom the United States must save from her backward culture. I'll provide the court with an expert letter from whomever corroborates my conclusion without complicating it. In my head, we've already won the case. A year later, we do. Congratulations, I tell her, on a job well done. Liberal and conservative rhetoric surrounding immigration policy reveals a broken system. In a public address on September 7th, 2023, New York Mayor Eric Adams laments he doesn't see an ending to any of this. A lack of meaningful reform for decades has yielded a dehumanizing system that reduces people to what weaknesses can win them a case. Lawyers crumble under unrelenting caseloads, making efficiency key and humanity a liability. Author Jazia Zaman's true story reveals a system on the verge of imploding. Why I Left Immigration Law by Jazia Zaman. There's an easy formula immigration attorneys follow. We excavate fragments of a client's past, collect this bit of ugliness and that bit of violence. The law demands just one story about their lives, and it's not of resilience or success. Unlike other kinds of law where attorneys argue their client did nothing wrong, a lot of immigration law begins with an admission of guilt. We concede our clients entered the country illegally, or stayed too long, or lied about their marriage, or whatever else. Confession and penance. Those are akin to sacraments in immigration law. Some clients understood the expected performance better than others. I emphasize the importance of appearing sorry to a dignified Korean client in his 60s. He sat rigid in every single one of our meetings, spoke in short, halting sentences, and refused eye contact. I warned him. If the judge sensed evasiveness or defensiveness, the case is lost. In court, we faced an unusually punitive tournament journey who saw my client's discomfort and exploited to her fullest. She fired variations of the same question and pounced angrily if his answer seemed uncertain. It was going really badly. 5 minutes before the hearing concluded, I asked him in closing if he had anything he wanted to say to the judge before she made her final decision. And dignity gave way to necessity. The old man bowed his head and began to weep. He said he was sorry and ashamed and begged through tears that he had no other home and implored the judge not to separate him from his family. It was exactly what I hoped would happen. And then we won the case. Look, there's no room for complexity here. Nuance only mutters your case. Black and white gets you results. A parent that wasn't deported, a family that stayed together, or an asylum seeker no longer having to fear returning to her home country. Gray loses. The law requires maniacal levels of consistency. If a written statement says that she wore a green sweater on Tuesday, she cannot say it was blue. If that client is deemed inconsistent, she obviously made the whole thing up, including the murder or torture that caused her to flee her country in the first place. During a month-long intensive preparation period for a domestic violence-based asylum case, my client would come to each meeting increasingly bleary-eyed and exhausted. The more we practiced, the less she seemed to remember. During one meeting, she would insist an event took place 10 years ago and the next happened last year. I don't sleep anymore, she told me, every time we met. I'd tell her she doesn't have the luxury of giving up. Her 4 children needed their mother. Then I'd steer her back towards describing the unspeakable acts of violence that produced each one of those children. Same violence that made it impossible to sleep every night. For the first time, I struggled with my discontent. It wasn't immediately obvious what had me dreading the case each day. A month later, we stood at the hearing. The male judge tried to determine whether my client was credible in response to a government attorney's skepticism about where, how, and how frequently her partner had raped her. As she described a short period of time where she was raped repeatedly, the judge stopped her to ask for clarification on what the instrument of penetration was each time. My client seemed puzzled at his heinous line of questioning. But to dispel my client's confusion, he added helpfully, "What I mean is, did he use his fingers that time or his penis?" Tuesday's rape was fingers, and Wednesday's was penis. Congratulations. Your asylum application has been granted. As lawyers, we are in such a fast-paced system that we lose the ability to think critically about it. Is the dehumanizing process worth the outcome? Most, if not all, immigrants and attorneys would say yes, and it's just hard to disagree. Which made my decision to quit so complicated. A few weeks after we had won that case, my client came in with her 4 children obediently in tow. They seemed utterly disinterested in the woman that had taken up much of their mother's time. "Are you finally sleeping?" I demanded of my final client. She laughed. And she said that she was.